Hello. Hello. We're going to be talking about the Hundred Years' War now, and admittedly, the Hundred Years' War is arguably one of the hardest and weirdest bits of the Conquered and Conquerors topics. I'm really going to try and sum it up here to make it nice and simple for you. The Hundred Years' War happens a long time after King John. There is a big time skip, which is why the names and things don't feel like there's very much cohesiveness. But the main thing you need to know is that after William the Conqueror took over Britain, Britain and France have been kind of connected. England and France have kind of owned bits of each other's territory through various different methods over hundreds and hundreds of years. And at one point, Edward III of England said, actually, I'm the King of France. And everyone in France was like, huh? You're not the King of France. We've got our own King of France. What do you mean? And he's like, my mum was the sister of the person that's the King of France. And everyone goes, no, it doesn't go through the mother, it goes through the father. And everyone's like, no, I'm the King of France. And basically, that begins a war. That isn't the only reason why there begins a war, but Britain and France have been kind of like tensing up to fight each other because they both owned, well, they were both so close to each other and both were earning so much money that, should we say, they both wanted to just steal something from each other. France wanted to take over England's wine trade in the south of France. You see that area, it's called Bordeaux down the bottom. England made lots of wine there, sold off for lots of money. France threatened to steal it. England sold lots of wool over abroad, and apparently France wasn't paying any tax on it. I mean, Edward, King Edward's the guy who claimed he was the king. His mother was the daughter of the king, pardon. But yeah, the idea was that Britain and France were not friends at this point in time, and this moment of saying, actually, I'm the king of you, kicked off a war. Now, it's called the 100 Years' War. It's not 100 years exactly, it's actually 116 years. But the thing that you need to know about this is, how can a war last that long? That's like a whole lifetime. There are people who were fighting in the 100 Years' War who weren't even alive when it began. That's how long it must have existed for. Actually, pretty much everyone fighting in the 100 Years' War at the end of it wasn't alive when it began. That's crazy, isn't it? And you need to kind of understand why that is. Because essentially, you need to understand that war costs money. You need money to pay all the soldiers. You need money for all the equipment. You need money to train all the people. You need money to recover and feed everybody. It's just a massive amount of expenditure. The thing is, England and France would go to war for years and years and years and years. Both of them would run out of money and they'd call a truce for a bit. And then they go to war again, and then they call a truce, have a break a bit, and then they go back to war again, and then it finished. And it took 116 years for those wars and those truces to eventually come to a conclusion, eventually come to, should we say, an end point. You do need to know a few of the things that occurred during this 100 Years' War. You need to know, should we say, the three different, should we say, distinct stages. I really don't think they'll get that intensely detailed in an exam situation, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit about them now. See, the first stage is all Edward III. He's capturing areas of France, and in fact, it looks pretty good for England after the first stage. But the truce begins, should we say, with England in the winning. The second stage begins, and France actually begins to win back a lot of the land that they're fighting over, and it becomes, should we say, back to neutral again. And then after the final truce, there's a third stretch of the war. A famous woman at this point in time is called Joan of Arc. She becomes, should we say, a Christian hero and some sort of prophetess, comes in and is a major leader in a number of battles against the English. There are some major wins for the English, there's some major wins for the French, and it kind of concludes with France winning everything back. What is today is modern France was won for the final time in the 100 Years' War. England loses France is the conclusion of the 100 Years' War. You just need to know that clearly. And I'm not kidding. That is a summary of the 100 Years' War. What you need to know is these main bits. 1. Why did Edward III claim to be King of France, and why did France disagree with him? 2. What points made England and France, should we say, hate each other? 3. Why did the war last so long? And 4. Who was Joan of Arc, and why was she significant? A short one for you with this lesson, and I'm glad it is. That's all you need to know with what the 100 Years' War was.